Hey, stay safe. Good to see you online already. Right, we'll just give it a minute or so and then let anybody else join in on the party, and then we'll begin. Yes, indeed. We are live again and welcome back to Perspectives. So, on today's show, a lot to get through today, as always, but we're going to begin at the very gates of Westminster here in the UK, where a massive community led lobby of the UK Parliament is unfolding as we speak. Driven by a severe documented spike in anti Sikh hate crimes, British Sikhs are demanding that the Home Office finally implement a statutory code of practice to end decades of institutional discrimination. But as Westminster is forced to listen, well, the sound of aircraft engines at Amritsar Airport are just starting up for the first time today, bearing zero tariff cargo under the new UK-India Free Trade Agreement. So, which is going to be louder, Sikh lobbyists or the engines of profit-driven global trade? All the while, arbitrary detentions and suspicious deaths are quietly swept under the rug. Do we think the British government is ever going to listen? Well, as Jaggi rots away, held illegally in an Indian jail cell, we'll take a look at how that same Indian law played out during the 1980s and 1990s. Where was the law when hundreds of thousands of Sikhs disappeared? And finally, the legacy of Bhai Jaswant Singh Kalra lives on, happily to report, as the Akal Takht makes two significant announcements from the banks of the Satluj River last night. All this and more on today's show. And of course, we'll take a look at the loads of great comments which have been filling up beneath the video. So thank you, as always, to you guys for those. Right then, let's get underway. I say a lot to get through today. We're going to start here for a change, actually, here in the UK. And this afternoon, even, hundreds of British Sikhs gathered. I gather, I'm only reporting it, assuming they have all turned up, but let's assume they have done. I think it is as I speak, they're hopefully all they're gathered in the House of Commons. But they are gathering actually inside the central lobby of that great building, the House of Parliament in Westminster. And it's not a routine photo opportunity or some sort of polite ceremonial gathering. It is actually a highly coordinated, urgent Sikh lobby of the UK Parliament. And it's organised in response to what community advocates describe as an unprecedented and deeply alarming crisis. It is a massive documented spike in anti-Sikh hate crimes, political hostility, and public harassment right across the United Kingdom. So to understand the gravity of today's gathering, because it is, of course, a really, really important get together. This you've got to look at the timeline. Since mid-May of this year, just going back to 2 or 3 months, British Sikh organisations have tracked a severe escalation in public hostility and right-wing targeting the community. So today, this morning, between 11:30 and 1 o'clock this afternoon, constituents from across the UK have apparently and hopefully been holding face-to-face talks with their local members of parliament in that parliamentary building. And following those lobby sessions, then the action shifts to Committee Room 14. And there, the Sikh network is presenting lawmakers with the hard, undeniable data that the results of comprehensive, rapid response spot surveys right across the Sikh community, obviously looking at, in detail, statistically speaking, at hate crimes and the direct psychological toll that this awful environment is taking on British Sikh families. It is obviously a real tangible thing. So why is this lobby happening right now? Well, the community is facing, obviously, a lot of attacks from all different angles on all sorts of different levels. So on the one hand, there is, of course, a profound systemic rise in just simple street-level bigotry. But on the other, there is a pervasive institutional ignorance across public bodies here in the UK regarding, for example, things like the Sikh Articles of Faith, the Kakars. And whether it's in airports, courtrooms, whatever, the basic religious rights of Sikhs are now being treated with suspicion, with friction, and sadly now increasingly so with bureaucratic heavy-handedness, and it hasn't always been the case. So there appears to be at least a level of backsliding, which of course is very worrying. So the core demand being put directly to our Home Secretary, a lady called Shabana Mahmood, and her ministry, the Home Office, is very clear. It's very logical. And of course, it is very long overdue. The immediate implementation of a statutory code of practice on the Sikh articles of faith. And this would legally bind public bodies to then respect, to recognise, and fairly accommodate these articles. It strips away any sort of arbitrary, discriminatory treatment that sadly is still there and has actually been plaguing the public sector for decades, despite, of course, our existing laws allowing the carrying of articles of faith, but it hasn't actually been enforced to the extent that it should. However, today's lobby is also taking place against the backdrop of very, very sad news. And again, it's a glaring, deeply uncomfortable double standard in how the British media seems to value our Sikh community. Just a few days ago, this awful story, I'm not even going to say hit the headlines, because that is the story. Just days ago, West London Police, the Met Police, launched a murder investigation after a young girl, she was a local Sikh mother, she was only 24 years old, she was stabbed to death in Hayes. Now, the response from the mainstream press, well, pretty much near total silence. It hasn't hit the headlines. The whole point is, it has not hit the headlines. The biggest headline I could find was in the local BBC News. Now, local news, the local reporters in London reported it, where it happened, but no other real mainstream outlet seemed to want to broadcast this story. There are all sorts of reasons why. One of the sad reasons is that it's becoming all too frequent, killings by knife crime. But it also does reek of double standards. Because a brief, cold mention tucked away in the regional crime sections like this is really all it seems to be the coverage this crime's got. There's no national outcry. There's no high-profile television debates. There's no statements of outrages from senior cabinet ministers. You know, Starmer hasn't gone onto one knee about it, which makes a nice change. But of course, contrast this. Contrast that silence with the absolute media storm that we witnessed just a few months ago following the tragic killing of this young lad, Anthony Novak. And when that tragedy occurred, the right-wing press, prominent public commentators instantly launched a relentless, coordinated campaign targeting the Sikh community. So they seized upon the tragedy to demand an outright ban on the Kirpan. You all saw it. And it went global, this discussion, weaponizing this horrific tragedy to strip British Sikhs of their fundamental religious freedoms. So this double standard is as stark as it is offensive. When a tragedy can be used to alienate, to demonize, or even just simply disarm the Sikh community, removing the Kirpan, it becomes front page national news for weeks. But when a Sikh girl is murdered on the streets of West London, a young mother, the national press suddenly loses any sort of appetite for outrage. It's just another story, isn't it? So this is the exact media hypocrisy and political neglect that today's lobby in Parliament is designed to shatter, to do something about. The message from the central lobby is very clear and it's very loud. British Sikhs will no longer allow their identity to be caricatured by a hostile press, nor will they allow their safety just to be simply ignored by a silent Parliament. So the statistics are there, the data's there. The MPs now being briefed. So this demand for a statutory code of practice is now officially at the door of the Home Office. So really the message to the politicians is very simple. The time for any sorts of words, for polite assurances, for rhetoric, it's over. We're past that now. What we need is results. It's the time for statutory protection. But ultimately, if you want a clue to the context of why the British government doesn't seem to care, because it really never does it? How often have I sat in this seat and just chuckled cynically at our politicians? Well, the clue, I spotted this headline this morning. This is the development that occurred yesterday at Sri Guru Ram Das Ji International Airport over in Amritsar. So while British Sikhs were here organising today's lobby in London to demand basic human rights protection, over in Punjab on the tarmac, there's a very different kind of ceremony taking place. With all sorts of happy political fanfare, senior officials from India's Directorate General of Foreign Trade and local export representatives gathered to wave off the very first cargo shipment destined for the UK under the newly active India-UK Free Trade Agreement. So the cargo itself was highly symbolic. It was a massive consignment of ready-made clothes, garments. It was manufactured in Punjab, flying zero duty directly into the British market. I mean, great if you're people in Punjab selling this. But under this sweeping new deal, under this free trade agreement, nearly 99% of Indian products will now enjoy tariff-free, zero-duty access to the UK. Fantastic, great. Now, previously, these garments faced import tariffs of up to 20%, but now those barriers have been dismantled. So for Whitehall and New Delhi, it's a moment of happy, unvarnished economic triumph. Hooray, let's wave the flags. They're popping the champagne corks, they're hailing a new era of bilateral partnership. They're celebrating the seamless flow of capital, of cash. But for the British Sikh community, the cargo plane taking off from Amritsar, the sight of that just holds a deeply bitter irony. Because to secure that zero duty access of textiles and manufacturing, successive British governments have systematically traded away the human rights, the legal protections, and the lives of British citizens, British Sikhs. Remember this guy? We won't forget. The British government seems to have forgotten. And nowhere is this trade-off more glaring than in the suspicious, tragic death of Avtar Singh Kandar, a prominent, highly vocal Khalistani activist. Bhai Kandar died suddenly in a Birmingham hospital in June 2023, under circumstances that his family, legal representatives, and just about everybody else who knows have long pointed to Indian state-sponsored poisoning. And despite intense community pressure, independent medical red flags, of course, the terrifying context of a global Indian transnational repression campaign, because, of course, Bhai Najjar was murdered just 2 days later or earlier, the British establishment has consistently refused to launch a full, transparent and independent public inquiry into his death, despite there being a whole sequence of red flags. It stinks. Because, of course, to do so would be to name the elephant in the room. It would mean acknowledging that a foreign intelligence agency, RAW, operated with absolute impunity on British soil to murder a British citizen. So, in that calculations of the civil servants in Whitehall and the politicians in Parliament, the life of a Sikh activist is just a small price to pay, isn't it? To keep a multi-billion-pound trade negotiation on track. And the message sent to New Delhi was very clear. Don't worry, we'll look the other way, as long as the trade deal remains intact. Keep the goods coming, we'll keep the cash flowing, everybody's happy. But they're not, are they really? Because it's a moral compromise. And it's not an isolated moral compromise. It is a long-standing diplomatic policy. And its primary victim for the last several years, of course, is Jagtar Singh Johal, another individual who we will refuse to forget. And we will keep reminding the world about the plight of Jaggi. So as trade officials celebrated in Amritsar, Jaggi, a British citizen from Scotland, Dumbarton, who's been arbitrarily detained in an Indian prison since 2017, was appearing via video link for his 71st trial hearing. And what transpired in that courtroom, once again, as usual, was no exercise in justice. It was a transparent, mocking display of state obstruction, Once again, the Indian prosecution failed to produce the single alleged witness upon whom the whole case against Jaggi hinges. And the prosecution's excuse? Well, they said the witness is currently abroad in the UK. He can't possibly attend court for at least another 3 to 4 weeks. So if this excuse sounds familiar, it's because the prosecution has used variations of this exact same excuse, this stalling tactic, for the past 8.5 years, over and over and over again. And in fact, the prosecution recently begged the Supreme Court of India for one final opportunity to call this crucial witness. Yet, at the local trial court level, prosecutors blatantly lied, pretending no such final ultimatum had been issued. The whole thing is just a fabrication of lies and just non-legal process. So faced with this complete failure to present a case, the court was then forced to convert the trial hearing into just another administrative proceeding, directing the prosecution to comply with outstanding requirements by July the 20th before any further trial dates can even be scheduled. So the Indian judicial system is not trying to find the truth. It's just running a marathon of deliberate bureaucratic exhaustion, hoping that the world will simply just grow tired of looking. Well, news to India, we will never grow tired of raising this story. And we will not forget Jagtar Singh Johal. And the most tragic element of this whole saga, his ongoing nightmare, is, of course, the deafening silence of the British government. So the current British Labour government has now been in power for pretty much exactly 2 years. And when they sat on the opposition benches, senior Labour figures, including David Lammy, were highly vocal. There you go. There's a quote from this article, is more than 4 years old. This was when David Lammy was in opposition, not in government, but in opposition. And it says here, Gurpreet, that's Jaggi's brother, had a meeting with the Labour leader and the Shadow Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, and hailed the admission as a breakthrough, but asked why it takes so long. So David Lammy was campaigning for Jaggi's release in opposition. They stood alongside Jaggi's family. They signed petitions. They demanded that the government of the day, Boris Johnson's government of the day, call for his immediate unconditional release. They recognised his detention as arbitrary. They recognised it was unlawful under international law. But it's funny, isn't it, how power has a habit of inducing amnesia. The moment Labour crossed the threshold of Downing Street, became the government, this fiery rhetoric of human rights was suddenly replaced by cold, transactional vocabulary of bilateral trade relationships, complex consular cases. The very same politicians who once championed Jaggi's freedom have spent the last 2 years just quietly helping the final stages of the free trade agreement that was flagged off in Amritsar yesterday. Jaggi's liberty, it appears, is just a highly effective campaign slogan for them, but of course a highly inconvenient diplomatic obstacle. And against this backdrop of systemic betrayal, a seemingly hopeful development did emerge yesterday. Coming out from the Foreign Office, for the first time in British history, the government has appointed a special envoy for British citizens detained overseas. Gosh, this guy, Alistair Burt. So Alistair Burt has taken this role. He's a highly experienced former Conservative Middle East minister, and the Foreign Office claims that this new position was created specifically to bring diplomatic clout, as they call it, and additional support to, and here's an important quote, particularly complex cases, especially those involving serious concerns about welfare, due process, or human rights. So human rights charities like Reprieve and others have cautiously welcomed this appointment. Yeah, okay, sounds good, at least on the face of it. Burt is a highly credible figure. He could potentially play a transformative role if he has the political courage to mobilise and bring arbitrarily detained British nationals like Jaggi back home. But, of course, we've got to look at this at a bit more of a critical, cynical eye. Why has it taken 2 years for the government to do this? Why did the Foreign Office block and delay this role for so long? Well, the answer lies in internal documentation. The Foreign Office was deeply concerned that a public-facing envoy advocating fiercely for the release of arbitrarily detained Britons would directly cut across, quote, normal bilateral diplomatic priorities. And they fear that the official title of Bert's role isn't Special Envoy for Hostage Affairs or Unlawful Detentions like the US government has. That's the precise job roles that the US equivalents have. No. The British government calls this guy the envoy for complex consular cases. It's a semantic choice. It's a deliberate choice. It's a bureaucratic shield. It basically allows the UK to avoid ever having to formally declare that British citizens are being held unlawfully or being subjected to state hostage taking by foreign partners. The title is designed to manage the problem, not to solve it, but just simply to soothe the families of victims, but ensuring the wheels of international commerce remain thoroughly greased. In other words, it appears to be a symbolic role. It does not appear to be an effective role. It has been designed, like everything the governments always do, Labour or even their predecessors, the Conservative governments, it's smoke and mirrors. It's designed to look good, like we're doing something about it, but in reality, when you look beneath the surface, it's a fudge, as we call it. The stark reality is that Alistair Bert's success won't depend on any diplomatic credentials that he has. It'll just depend entirely on whether the Foreign Secretary and the Prime Minister give him the authority to put human lives ahead of trade deals. If the envoy is kept on a tight lead, forbidden from disrupting the negotiations like the India-UK Free Trade Agreement, then this new role is nothing more than just window dressing. Expensive, bureaucratic window dressing. A fudge, as I call it. It's a sophisticated mechanism designed to manage public outrage while a British citizen continues to rot in a Delhi prison. So, as we see these cargo planes taking off from Amritsar now with presumably ever-increasing regularity, you've got to ask a fundamental question about the nature of modern British foreign policy. What is the actual value of a British passport? If you're a corporate exporter, it's worth millions. But if you are a British Sikh demanding human rights and accountability, I'm afraid your passport isn't even worth the paper it's printed on. Appalling, isn't it? So, I want to look at, this is a legal thing. And it, on the face of it, appears, it's all dry and legal jargon, whatever. But it's an important story, this. And stick with me on this, because I'll explain, hopefully in more simple terms, what this is all about. This is actually is important. And it's related to the films, the Satluj film that's obviously just come out. And so the silencing of Satluj right across the world now, it's often framed purely as just a simple story of censorship. But actually, for those who are analysing in more detail the legal history of what happened in Punjab during those years, the film's suppression points and what the film actually referred to, in a very subtle way, it was a much older, deeper silence. It actually, this whole story reopens a very important constitutional question. And I do talk a lot, particularly in some of my podcasts, about the constitution, the Indian constitution, and the rights and wrongs of it. But ultimately, why did this writ of habeas corpus matter? This habeas corpus, and you can freeze afterwards, you can freeze the frame, you can read this and to understand what habeas corpus is. But in simple terms, it is the court's fundamental power to demand the physical production of a missing person, a missing detainee. So the question is, why did habeas corpus, this legal principle, fail so completely in Punjab during the height of those extrajudicial murders? So while Jaswant Singh Kalra was methodically counting unclaimed bodies right across the crematoria of Amritsar, the Punjab and Haryana High Court in Chandigarh sat as the constitutional guardian of life and liberty, in theory. But the legal machinery of this habeas corpus just did not function, and it should have done, and this would have prevented what happened happening. So, what's it all about? So any serious assessment of the courts during that period has to start with the legislature. That is the people who make the laws. So in March 1988, the Indian Parliament passed the 59th Amendment to the Constitution of India. They introduced Article 359A. So this provision, and bear with me, I know it's all very dry and legal, but bear with me, I'll explain it in layman's terms in a moment. The provision was highly specific and it was uniquely punitive. It applied only to the state of Punjab. It allowed the right to life and personal liberty under Article 21 to be suspended during a proclamation of emergency. So for the first time since the post-emergency situation in the 1970s, habeas corpus could be switched off by executive decree in one specific territory of India. So, even when the constitutional right was technically active, the High Court's practical handling of this habeas corpus issue, these petitions as they're called, showed a strong reluctance to challenge the security apparatus, the apparatus of KPS Gill and Beant Singh, the chief minister at the time. So in a landmark study that was published in 2002 in the Harvard Human Rights Journal, this lady, Jaskaran Kaur, conducted a meticulous review of 90 of these habeas corpus petitions directly from the Chandigarh High Court's records. And the resulting data paints a very stark picture of a system in retreat. Ooh, mouse going a bit too quickly there. So, an analysis of the wider High Court records reveals that between 1990 and 96, the court allowed just 214 out of over 7,000 criminal writ petitions. That's a success rate of barely 3%. And the daily reality of these proceedings, so one of my lights is going mad at the moment. So the daily reality of these proceedings was defined by procedural compliance over substantive inquiry. This is all very complicated case. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to just turn this light off because it's making my eyes go funny. Just give me 30 seconds. I'll let you guys read that whilst you give me 30 seconds. It's the joys of going live and having equipment that goes and fails on you. Anyway, so as I was saying, so when families petitioned the court, the state responded with standard unchallenged narratives. So if a detainee vanished, if one of these disappeared, as they were, if they literally disappeared, police affidavits frequently claimed the individual had escaped from custody. So former Advocate General of Punjab later admitted that the word escaped in those court papers was understood by all parties to mean the detainee had escaped from the world. In other words, they'd been murdered. So that was the worst kept secret of the time. So when in court they said, oh, the detainee escaped, so we can't present them in court, everybody in court knew basically they were dead. So the Supreme Court of India tried to intervene occasionally, and at the time expressed sharp frustration at the High Court's paralysis on this. So following the 1993 disappearance of Ropar advocate Kulwant Singh, his wife and their 2-year-old child, that's a whole family who were disappeared, the High Court then refused to order an independent inquiry. But overturning this decision in the Punjab and Haryana High Court Bar Association versus State of Punjab 1994, that's the specific case for those of you who might want to go look it up, the Supreme Court noted that the High Court was, quote, wholly unjustified in shutting its eyes and ears to the disappearance of an advocate and his whole family, concluding that it had failed to perform the duty entrusted to it under the Constitution. So Okay, what does all that mean? To strip away all that legal jargon, let's look at what this actually means on the ground, in, as I say, in layman's terms. It was a systematic, state-engineered legal blackout designed to allow extrajudicial murder to happen with absolute impunity. So habeas corpus is supposed to be the ultimate emergency brake on government tyranny. It's the law's way of demanding, produce the body, show us where this person is. And by passing a law that turned that protection off specifically for Punjab at that time, the state then obviously created a legal black hole behind which, or into which, they could hide tens of thousands of bodies. So when the police abducted someone, the families then ran to the High Court begging for help, but the courts didn't just fail, they actively looked the other way, accepting just copy and paste police lies while the bodies of those disappeared were being quietly dumped into the canals. It was basically a perfect deadly circle. The legislature, the lawmakers, turned off the constitutional rights, the police carried out the killings, and the courts provided the silence to cover their tracks. So this judicial outrage didn't occur in a vacuum. The physical danger to the legal community the legal community itself was in danger. 4 of the prominent advocates actively filing these habeas corpus petitions were themselves abducted or killed. And the Supreme Court was forced to issue specific protection orders for 17 other human rights attorneys in Punjab. And judges and their families lived under constant threat from both militant factions and state security actors. So you can see even the legal profession itself was, to some degree, caught in the middle of all this. Some of them at least tried to enact justice, but even the Indian state machinery closed down on them and disappeared, even some of them. And again, instantly, it's just reminding me of the 1930s in Germany with the rise of the Nazis. The same thing happened with the judiciary then. They took control of the judiciary. Any advocates, any lawyers who tried to call it out or stand it up were then actually themselves either disappeared or were themselves imprisoned. So this is why we often compare 1930s Germany to India. The parallels are frightening. But the central tragedy of all this era remains the systemic one. The very constitutional protections designed to protect individuals when the state is at its most powerful were deliberately dismantled or just ignored at the moment when they were needed most. That is the warning to us all for the future. So, I want to do this. I was going to cover this yesterday, and it's definitely worth talking about. This is, of course, by Kalra and the story. And this was, I think, it was the World Sikh Organization posted this up, and I thought it's definitely worth talking about, just to remind people that the actual story. I mean, we all know the general story of Bhai Kalra, but this is just the specific sort of final days of Kalra. It was June 1995. 3 months before he himself, sadly, was abducted and murdered. He traveled to Canada. It was this famous trip to Canada. And it was under the auspices of the World Sikh Organization. And he was invited to stand inside a parliamentary committee room in Ottawa. And this is the photo from that room. And before Canadian members of parliament, international human rights advocates, members of the diaspora, he laid out the cold statistical evidence of his findings, these famous findings now of these tens of thousands that were disappeared. And he didn't speak of any abstract political theories. He just spoke specifically of the logistics of 25,000 municipal cremations, proving that thousands of families were mourning children who had been quietly cremated under false names. So during that landmark international tour, Kalra delivered a speech, the speech that he gave to this audience, that's apparently become a bit of a legendary piece of modern Sikh history. He recounted a fable about a small, fragile candle that decided to challenge the absolute darkness of the night. And it was a deeply prophetic message. He knew the immense danger that he faced by returning to Punjab. And friends and family and international allies just said to him, look, don't go back to, you must not go back to Punjab. Please seek political asylum in the West. But he refused. And this is really the measure of the man. He said that his duty was to return to the families of the disappeared. So on September the 6th, 1995, Jaswant Singh Kalra was abducted from outside his home in Amritsar by officers of the Punjab police. I mean, you could sort of flippantly say you couldn't make it up. I mean, how on earth could the Indian state have the absolute nerve to go and actually abduct and murder the very man who's calling out the tens of thousands of abductions and murders with the world's eyes on him? I mean, it's just the barefaced thing of the Indian state, you know, with the world watching this guy. And India just says, we don't care. So following a subsequent investigation by the CBI, it was established that he was tortured, he was murdered in custody, and his body disposed of in the Harrick Canal, the very waters where so many of his documented, unidentified victims themselves are being cast. It's deeply tragic. It's absolutely outrageous. But I am delighted to say that his legacy has never gone away. It lives on. This is interesting. It's the final slide, actually, from the WSO. They say after his abduction, a Canadian politician, this lady, who was grabbed by the Indian High Commissioner, said, cool it, because she was raising uncomfortable questions about Kalra's disappearance. I mean, you know, again, I'm going to use that French phrase, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Here we are in 2026, essentially the same thing going on. So anyway, that if you want to have a look at that, you can do so afterwards, freeze the frame. But that is the order of speakers in that event. But I want to finish off today with a very, very important story. And I talk about Bhai Kalra's legacy. His legacy lives on, and bless her, through his widow. Because, of course, 30 years after his death, the memory of his work has transitioned from just simple human rights advocacy to a formal religious and institutional canon almost. So last night, amidst the fallout of the banning of the Satluj film, the Akal Takht, the supreme temporal seat of Sikhism, led by the acting Jatadar, Jani Kuldeep Singh Gargaj, held this historic prayer ceremony, the Ardas, at Harrick Patan, of course, that place where so many bodies were dumped, including, sadly, of course, tragically, Bhai Kalra's. And during the assembly, the Jatadar issued 2 directive orders to the SGPC, the Shiromani Gurdwara Prabandak Committee. Firstly, the establishment of the Shahidi Patan Memorial. So the site there at Harrick Patan, where the Bias and Sutlej rivers meet, and of course where tragically countless bodies were historically dumped during those periods, it has now been formally designated as Sikh Shahidi Patan. And so on that location, there will be a permanent memorial erected to honour Bhai Jaswant Singh Kalra, and of course, all those who then disappeared. So this is huge and it's fantastic. So there's going to be an official memorial established at this location. And I have no doubt it will form the focus. Sorry, I've just seen your message. Can you talk over Gurpreet Singh Rahal? I will do. I'll do another story about Gurpreet. In fact, I keep meaning to try and get him on as a guest. Don't let me forget that. I will. So you just caught my eye with that comment. Thank you, Iconcar. I will, and I have covered his story, and I will go back to his story. But anyway, back to this story. So yeah, there is no doubt that this memorial, once it is erected, it will form a focal point, and a really important focal point, because when you've got these focal points, it brings people together. It reminds people on a permanent basis what happened, and it will not allow the Indian state to let it go. So anyway, secondly, the Occult Act. This really is the big news. So the SGPC has been directed by the Jatadar to build a comprehensive, official, digital and physical archive documenting every single Sikh victim, every extrajudicial execution, and every unclaimed cremation that took place between 1982 and 1995. And that registry will be housed permanently within the official archives of the Akal Takht. So that, as I say, is massive, because basically it means the work of Bhai Kalra continues. It's never gone away, but it now means that those archives that he documented, that huge amount of evidence, that forensic documented evidence of the disappeared from just the Amritsar region, is now going to be firstly lodged in this this repository at the Akal Takht, but it's now going to be added to. So his work is basically going to continue. So all the evidence now is going to be gathered of all the other disappeared. So let us hope and pray that as much truth comes out whilst families are still with us and the memories are still there, so that we can actually even get an idea of just how many genuinely died, that's an understatement, were murdered by the Indian state. So we shall see. But as I say, it's fantastic news. That it really is fantastic news. So, and then finally, just to wrap up the today's stories, just a quick one, really. Of course, it is it is the streaming of Satluj. We know Satluj obviously has been pulled from Z5, both in India and now globally. Well, this photo has been posted up. This is the Gurdwara in Smethwick here in the UK. And I just love this photo. It's a beautiful photo. It is a huge crowd outside the Gurdwara watching Satluj being shown to them. This is wonderful defiance. This is the power of the people. This is why I love this photograph so much. Because firstly, it doesn't matter what the Indian state does. They can never kill the Sikh spirit. But also, just from a wider perspective, just from a more general observation, any state can try to be as authoritarian as it likes, but you will never, ever, in the end, beat the people. You cannot beat the truth, and you cannot beat the people. The people always, without exception, throughout human history, have always won in the end. Authoritarian regimes come and go, and they come and go, sadly, with tragic regularity, but they are always temporary, because ultimately, the people always win. It might take a few years, it might even take a few decades, but the people always manage to overthrow those regimes in the end, because the regime only has to make one mistake. That's all it takes. The regime has to be brutally authoritarian 100% of the time effectively, because one slip, that's all it needs for the people. They are many, the regime is few. They only need to make one mistake, and quite often it's a catalytic event, as I often refer to, and that regime dissolves away, just gets swept away in a tsunami of the people exercising their democratic freedoms. I've seen it in my lifetime countless times across Eastern Europe. We saw it in the Soviet Union, the great example of all. You know, one of the largest authoritarian regimes on the planet that existed for a few decades, but ultimately just swept away by the people who it was trying to rule authoritarianly. So, as I say, this photo is symbolic to me on just a very, very small scale, but it is symbolic of a much, much bigger story that India can do all it wants. It's never going to stop this. It's never going to stop the Sikh people from being free. They can be authoritarian as much as they like, but ultimately, the Sikh people will one day globally be free, as in they will have their own land, Khalistan. That is why we're all sitting here united in that one single goal, because we know it's coming. And that is the proof in that just small picture there. Excuse me, I've got a bad throat. So that's the proof, as I say, a picture paints 1,000 words. So anyway, wonderful to see. So well done to all the Gurdwaras and places that have been showing this film. It is literally all over. It's been set up in so many places. Social media now is full of all these pictures of showings of the film. Fantastic. So anyway, okay, let's move on to our comments for the day. So let's start. Who are we starting with today? Excuse me. It's opened up somewhere where it shouldn't open up. There we go. Right. Lakwinder Singh. Welcome. Has the honour of the first comment of the day. Thank you, Lakwinder Singh. Always great, G. Thanks for your support. No, thank you. I think I've got to turn this one straight back and say it's you guys. Thank you for your support. Yes, indeed. Stay safe. Comments Corner. It's one of my favourite parts of this. Sadly, Critics Corner hasn't featured for a while and still hasn't featured. Doesn't feature on today, frustratingly. Come on, where are our critics? We need some more critical comments. It's always good for a laugh. Where are we? Sorry, my mouse has disappeared over about 5 screens over. There we go. Bobby Singh. Hello, Bobby. Your truthful reporting is highly admired and appreciated. Good heavens, that's a wonderful compliment. I'm sure totally undeserving. But the important point is it is truthful reporting. Whether it's admired or appreciated is entirely up to you, but it is very, very welcomely received. Thank you. Sukhvinder Singh, have you found your pants? Guess what? It's still bare legs day because, you can see the ladder. That was the ladder I had to use to change the light. Yes, unfortunately, it is still pants day. It's still shorts day because, of course, it's still baking hot here. It's actually, I think, what are we, in the late 20s or something today? Yeah, it's hot, unfortunately. So, unfortunately, it's still just going to be shorts day until the weather breaks. It might be for another 2 months in shorts. So, but indeed, but at least I've got my shorts on. So, Hardal, hello, Hardal Singh. Truth will always prevail. Spot on. What you sow, you will receive. Reap what you sow, as we say. Absolutely. Thanks, Angus. Nice show. Keep up the good work. Well, I will keep up the good work as long as you guys keep up the comments and keep watching and keep spreading the word. We need more views, particularly on the live show. Just try and boost it. And I think so you guys know, and I'll remind you tomorrow as well. The plan is shortly, subject to a few technical things, that I'll have a phone-in capability. Yes, like Surinder's show on the Punjabi side. Surinder, you can call into Surinder's show anytime you like. So, of course, I'm going to introduce that onto this show as well, sometime as soon as I can work out how to do it. Of course, I'm a bit of a dinosaur with these things, and it is a one-man show, so I've got to work out how on earth I'm going to press buttons to make it happen. But you guys are going to have the opportunity to phone in live and talk to me live. No rude comments, no bad language, just sensible phone calls, please. And we can discuss anything that you would like to discuss. You can ask questions, etc. So yes, indeed, stay safe. You can call in as long as you behave yourself. All right. So anyway, that's just a heads up for you guys. Anyway, right, let's continue with the comments. Bikajit Singh, very good, thank you. Very good comment. Excellent comment. Stay safe. Hello, you're back again. America has reacted well to these criminal syndicates. These bounty posters of most wanted should be put up on the wall. Indeed. And I think, as you remind us, I think Surinder has actually said on his show that he recommends everybody downloads the poster, that the FBI poster of the wanted people, and post it up everywhere you can. Why the devil not? Why on earth not? Jupiter totally agrees. You're back again. Stay safe. The media of India try to cover the tracks of the crime that the state has done. That's what they're there for. That's why we call it the Godi media. They have this massive, as you rightly say, this massive machine that people like us are up against. All these little shows like mine, we are these tiny sort of minnows swimming around these sharks of the Godi media. And we're just trying to alert the world of what's really going on. So we always have an uphill battle. We are, in Christian terms, the David and Goliath battle. We are fighting the giant of the Godi media. We can only win with you guys spreading the word. So again, it's just another reminder to you guys to spread the good word that we're here. We need more people. Okay, Sufty Muffins with a very timely comment. Please share and subscribe. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, Sufty Muffins, for your continued advocacy for the show. Oh, you're back again with some ice cream cone things. Hooray. Manveer Singh, Oh, good job, Angus. Another nice comment. Thank you. Keep up the good work. Take care and be safe. Yes. And I think the tragic part of this comment is that final bit, be safe. I mean, how better can you describe and sum up the issue that we have to talk about daily? Is that literally anybody who advocates for the Sikh community, who advocates for the Khalistan cause, has to be careful. They fear for their safety. Thank you, Paul. I'm just trying to read it because it's all Paul Purewell. Good morning. Good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. But yeah, as I've said, it's, isn't it tragic, but doesn't it support the whole premise of what I have to talk about daily, is the fact that we have to be careful in a democratic nation with free speech, that even India is so undemocratic, so against freedom of speech, that all of us who represent the Khalistan cause have to be careful. It says it all. Jupiter totally sums up the truth. There you go. If you want the truth, there it is. KPS Gill was a great butcher in reality. Well, he was certainly a butcher. I think, as somebody said, I think on yesterday's show, it's a bit of an insult to butchers the world over, actually, to call KPS Gill a butcher, but we know what you mean. Belvinda Kent, thank you very much. God gave you long life and healthy life. God bless you. Well, thank you. And the same to you and to all of you watching the show. It's a lovely comment. I do appreciate that because it's so well-meaning, it's so heartfelt, and it genuinely gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling. And I do send it in a massive wave of similar back to you guys as well. Thank you for that. And Nirmal Singh. The only solution, Khalistan. Nothing less. There is no compromise. And as you quite often do actually put this comment up, the double-headed snake, Hindustani terrorists, the Hindutvas. Yes, they should be destroyed once and for all. And love to Australia. Love to you guys down under who are watching, because I do know we do have at least one or two watchers. And 1S1 and 2 joined us. Hi, Angus. Just got in from work. Thanks for joining us. Nice to see you. As always. Nirmal Singh's back again. The end of Hindustan is coming soon. Khalistan Zindabad. Love Australia. Indeed, it is. And that's always a great way to end the show. Oh, gosh, we've still got 9 minutes to go. We've run short. I must have, for once, we haven't run over time. How about that? It must be a record-breaking show. Excellent news. Let's take a question. Can Khalistan, in reality, ever be possible without massive scale violence and refugee crisis? Okay, that's a good question. And because we've got a few minutes, let's talk about that. Yes is a simple answer. The reason that the Khalistan movement is so popular, is so now globally known about, is because it is being fought in a very different way. In the 1970s, 80s, 90s, there was a militant movement. It was a militant movement designed in some ways as literally just a self-defensive measure against the persecution, the murderous persecution of the Indian state. But it was rooted in the Khalistan cause. So ultimately, the ultimate goal, amongst other goals, but essentially the ultimate goal, all could be boiled down to that single goal of a sovereign nation of Sikhs, Khalistan, in the 80s and 90s, which had its roots all the way back through, well, in fact, all the way back to the Sikh Empire. But it failed. It failed for one very simple reason, because it tried violence. It tried mass violence, and it failed because you cannot beat the Indian state. It's too big. It's got, I don't know how many troops it's got, but it's got 500,000 troops in J&K. That's just the ones in J&K. How on earth can you defeat that army? I know the Sikhs would like to have a damn good try. I know who my money would be on. But ultimately, in reality, you can't beat the Indian state. It's just too big and powerful. It's too well resourced. So they realized this. And thanks to KPS Gill, Beant Singh, all the butchers, they suppressed the movement. The people just said, okay, we give up. We cannot win this way. So instead, the Khalistan movement took a step back and said, look, we need to work out how is this going to happen. We clearly can't do it through brute force. We can't do it through violence. Let's do it the democratic, peaceful way. And that is what they've done. They've been very intelligent about what they're doing. They've decided to go global with it. They know they're never going to persuade India. India's never going to say yes willingly to Khalistan. So they've gone outside India and said, look, it is our democratic right under international law to have our own sovereign nation because of all the legal the legal reasons that have been set out. And this is why now the Khalistan movement is making huge amounts of progress, because we've got, for example, the Sikh Federation International, who are now lobbying the United Nations. They are lobbying all these global organizations. They've got teams of lawyers now who are building up a legal case so that one day in the foreseeable future, they can go to an international court and they can lay out the case, the legal case and the democratic case for Khalistan. And that is the way to do it. That is why I believe Khalistan is coming, because, yeah, it's not going to happen through violence unless literally the American armed forces join in. Then we might have a chance, but that ain't going to happen unless something really big happens. So in reality, the only way it can happen is through the way it's happening as we speak, which is through a slow process of democracy and legal lobbying. Now, that takes many forms. As I said, it's lobbying the United Nations. It is also the referendum. And Sikhs for Justice are doing a massive, positive job. 40% of Punjab's in non-conceit. I'll come back to that point in a moment. How are we doing for time? We've got a few minutes. The referendum is one pillar, one foundational pillar of the Khalistan movement. The other foundational pillars include the legal case, etc. And another foundational pillar may be one day a referendum in Punjab. But anyway, but you need all those separate pillars to support the whole platform upon which Khalistan will be established. So they're all playing their part. No one is more important than the other. They are all playing an equal part, because it's like a big recipe. You need all those ingredients to bake the cake of Khalistan, for want of a better metaphor. So, but yes, you say 40% of Punjab is non-Sikh. Yeah, it is quite likely that many Punjabis, non-Sikhs, will actually say yes to Khalistan because of, particularly if they're lower caste, they've got everything to gain. They've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. And you only need to look at the Sikh Empire back in the 1900s, in the 19th century, the 1800s. The Sikh Empire, I think actually, I'm correct in saying, had a minority of Sikhs. It was not a Sikh theocracy. It just happened to be run under a Sikh governance model, the Panj Pyari, I think it was called. But that was so attractive as a governing model. It was democratic centuries ahead of its time. It actually is a unique model of democracy because it is absolute equality. It gave an equal voice to everybody. It didn't matter what your religion was, what your ethnicity was, what your background was. You could be a Buddhist, a Hindu, a Jain, a Christian, whatever. A Jew, of which there were many in the Sikh Empire. So the point is, the model has worked before, so it will work again. So all those Punjabi non-Sikhs, they've got everything to gain for Khalistan. If the Khalistan movement can set out an attractive enough case of what Khalistan will be, what it will represent, its potential success as a nation, its commercial success, its standard of living, its governance model, it will stand in stark contrast to the inequalities of India. India is one of the most unequal societies on this planet. The poverty in India is unforgivable for a nation that has a space program, for a nation that has billionaires. That won't happen in Khalistan, I'll guarantee you now, because the governance model is designed specifically to ensure that does not happen. That is what will be attractive. That is what will make it win. Because this isn't beating a people into, you will be an Indian. This is, if you want to be a Khalistani, this is what we offer. And it's wonderful. So that's the difference. It's an attraction as opposed to a brute force, you will be a member of our nation. The Indian model, the colonial model, that is what that is. India is a colonial model. Khalistan is a free nation. That's the key fundamental difference. So hopefully that answers your question. And what's my opinion about the relationship between Balochistan independence and Khalistan? I would refer you, we're out of time now, but I will refer you back to, gosh, was it a week ago? 10 days ago, I did a story on that very thing. And in the past, I've also done the Balochistan situation. There are a lot of similarities, but it's not clear cut. It's not a black and white situation. It's not like Balochistan should align with Khalistan, because there are differences. and there are important differences, but their plight is actually very, very similar. Ultimately, there are other players in that game, which includes China, of course. But I would refer you back to, as I say, the show. You have to Google it or go back through our channel. I did a specific section on the Balochistan story, so do go back to that. Obviously, I don't have time now. We're literally out of time now, so I'm going to have to wrap up. But yeah, so do go back to one of the previous shows on that one. That will answer your question. So hopefully, I think, yeah, we better wrap up now because we're up to the hour mark. So you guys have been really active on comments. Thank you to all of you who've been there. Hopefully I've caught some of your questions and answered them. But if you don't like it, send me a comment below once this is posted. Or better still, send me an email if you've got questions, you want me to answer something, or you want me to talk about something. Just send me a message. Much appreciated. But that is it for another day. Tomorrow's show is actually pre-recorded for logistical reasons. Thursday's show tends to be pre-recorded, not live. So you won't be able to dial in tomorrow. But so do watch the show for tomorrow. Friday, we've got the podcast with Dr. Growell, an interesting one, very relevant to what we've been talking about. It's all about misinformation and how do we stand up to India and how do we regain the narrative. So do watch out for that. But guys, that is it, sadly, for another day. Oh, it's quite heartbreaking leaving you guys knowing you're all there, but unfortunately we must bring the show to a close. But as always, it's been wonderful having you guys there. It's really nice to know that you're watching. Really nice to see all your comments. Much appreciated. Do keep your questions coming, etc., etc. But I'm going to close the show now. Have a great night. I'll see you guys tomorrow for tomorrow's show. God bless you all, and have a great night. That's it. Give me a minute now to find the end stream button, which is always a problem. But that's it. Thanks, guys. Thanks for your support. We'll catch you tomorrow.